Hey Devils fans, Chris here. Before we begin today's episode, we just wanted to put out a quick disclaimer, if you haven't already noticed, that this episode is releasing several days late. The reason for this is that Georgia unfortunately contracted COVID this past week. She is doing well in her recovery and should be back on schedule just in time for the holidays to end. We thank you so much for your understanding and patience, and now on to the show. Welcome back, Devils fans, to the holiday edition of Devils Down Under, the December 22nd, 2023 edition. I am Chris, as always, along with my co-host, Georgia. Georgia, how's it been?
Well, last episode we said we were going to be regular, and then we skipped a week again. And that is because...
We should just make this a running gag at this point.
I know.
Just every week.
That is because I have injured my knee. Funnily enough, when I was ice skating last week in my last ice hockey practice for the year, just afterwards, and I'd taken off all my pads and it was the public skate session, I fell on my knee and I seem to have torn or sprained or some kind of injury to one of my ligaments in my knee, and I've been hobbling around, so unfortunately we couldn't record last week.
It is only appropriate that it happened playing hockey, I feel.
Of course.
I feel if you were going to mess your knee up, that was the only way to do it.
Yeah.
It's got to be done playing hockey.
But at least it happened in the last one of the year, and I don't have hockey again until February, so, or maybe even March. So, you know, I got a while to recover from a torn ligament in my knee.
Yeah, so what is it? We're worried about the MCL, right?
Yeah.
With you? Yeah.
Yep. And of course all the specialists are on holiday in New Zealand, so hard to get an appointment now.
There is a part of me that hopes that something is wrong, just hear me out, just because you've been in so much pain that
Yeah.
I would be very alarmed if there wasn't. I told you this before, like, I'm obviously not a doctor, but even I would be like, you might want to go back and look at those MRIs again, Doc.
Yeah.
Because, so for that reason alone, I'm hoping that they find something so at least we know what it is, and then that you can, start working towards rehab. But of course, if it is an MCL or an ACL or an LCL or whatever it is, that means that you're going to be healing for the next probably 6 to 8 months at minimum. So that part of it won't be too fun. Yeah. The best time of the year, too, because you're moving. So this could not have happened at a more convenient time for you.
Yep. Moving this week. So it's just a busy time of year. It's also my last week of work for the year. So, things just got a little bit behind schedule with recording.
It's like, this is why I wish that you liked the National Lampoon's Vacation movies, because the Christmas Vacation movie feels like it would be perfect in this setting right now. Yeah. Because anything that can go wrong with you is going wrong at the worst possible time.
How have you been?
Well, it's the holidays, so lots of getting ready for that, which I have those who know me know that I have a love-hate relationship with Christmas. So, we're getting through. I guess I can't complain. And I'm kind of I guess doing what the Devils are doing, which is treading water a little bit. It feels like. Even though they did go on a little 7-2 stretch there, it kind of, I don't know, this Philly loss last night really kind of stings a little bit more.
Yeah.
As a result of the Devils' recent struggle. So we'll talk about that and more here.
Yeah. So since the last recording, we've had 7 games.
Well, why don't we before we get into that, why don't we do last week's Guess That Devil?
Oh yes. Now it's my turn to forget it. So last episode's Guess That Devil. I'll read the clue for you. This devil was drafted 2nd overall by the New Jersey Devils in 1987 and played 5 seasons total with the Devils throughout his career. He was known for his goal-scoring ability and at one point led the NHL in shorthanded goals and at another point led it in power play goals. And you were pretty certain of the answer to this.
Yeah, this is a very, very important name in Devils history for a few different reasons, but this is undoubtedly Brendan Shanahan.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I thought I'd do a little bit of an easier one because I did a more difficult one the week before that you didn't quite get. So, yeah, this one's Brendan Shanahan. previous director of player safety for the NHL and the current president of hockey ops for Toronto Maple Leafs. Hopefully I got that right. He's the only player with over 600 goals and 2,000 penalty minutes. And he also holds the unofficial record for the most Gordie Howe hat tricks, which is a goal, an assist, and a fight in the game. So his record is 17 of those in the regular season. He also had a role in a Jim Carrey film, Me, Myself, and Irene. So, don't know if you guys knew that, but that's fun.
Yes, Brendan Shanahan. He was, as soon as you said second overall pick in the 1987 draft, I knew right away who it was. And then, of course, everything after that was just more confirmation of that. Shanahan's got a very rich history in the NHL, not just with the Devils, but in general. Like, as you said, he is currently the president of hockey operations of Toronto. He was the man that fired Kyle Dubas this past offseason. So,
yeah.
A very controversial move after all the dust cleared. So we are yet to see how that is going to play out for both teams. But yep,
I also
no doubt about that.
I also love that he was the previous director of player safety, and he has over 2,000 penalty minutes from when he was playing, which is generally from unsafe playing. So that's amusing to me.
All right, well, I am back on the positive side. I'm back on the winning side of the Guess That Devils, so hopefully that trend will continue. I'm looking forward to seeing what this week's is. So,
yeah, I had to remind myself of that, so I'll read that at the end of the episode as usual.
Yeah. I wanted to make one quick note that next week, Christmas is on Monday. So it shouldn't affect when the episode goes out, but we might have to record a day later than usual, which we've done a few times anyway, so it shouldn't be that big of a deal. But that means it might go out on Friday afternoon as opposed to Friday morning for everybody stateside or in North America, so and Europe and anywhere else that is not in the future.
Yeah,
Sorry,
that'll be the
terrible
Saturday
joke.
for me. Goes out on Saturdays for me, yeah.
Yep. So, but other than that, Christmas should not affect next week's episode other than that. So, yeah.
Shall we get into the episode?
Yeah, why don't you give us a rundown of all of the scores since our last recording, which was 7 games ago.
Yes, 7 games. So we are 4-2-1 in the last 7 games. We had a win against Seattle, 2-1. We had a win against Calgary, 4-2. We had a loss against Edmonton, 4-1. We had a win against Boston, 2-1. We had a win against the Blue Jackets. Sorry, I don't know why I went from state to... that was a win, 6-3. We had a loss against the Ducks, which was 5-1. And then we had a loss in overtime against the Flyers, which was 3-2. So, 4-2-1. Not the greatest.
Quite a bit of an up and down series of games. Yeah, you know what? One thing I've noticed about a lot of these games lately, I think this has probably been a trend most of the season, but it really feels like it's been more obvious lately, is when the Devils win, it's usually, it tends to be lately kind of a scratch and claw kind of win. There's a couple exceptions in there, like the Blue Jackets game. And the Calgary game was actually, I thought, a lot closer than 4-2 indicated. But when they lose, they usually lose in heartbreaking or terrible fashion.
Yeah.
I don't want to break down every single one of those games, but there were a few games that I wanted to highlight out of that, if that sounds good to you.
Yeah, sure.
The Edmonton game, or sorry, not the Edmonton game, the game against Boston, the 2-1 win against Boston, the Blue Jackets game, the Anaheim game, and the Philly game. So basically the last 4 games of that stretch. Geez, where do we start? I mean, so the Devils come out of that initial stretch there right before the Anaheim game with 7-2 in their previous 9, I believe. Up until that point, they had a 3-game winning streak before the Edmonton game. Then they won against Boston and Columbus. And that Boston win, I thought was, I really thought was more important on the surface than it may, or more important than it may have appeared on the surface. First of all, I believe that was the first time that we've beaten Boston in 2 years, roughly. I think we're like
something like that.
I think we're like 0-5 or 0-6 against them in our last Havre meetings. Yeah. 2, that was a hard fought win against Boston. I don't think anybody expected the Devils to go in there and win by 3 goals. I don't even go into those Boston games expecting them to win, much less win by 3. But I thought that was a really gutsy, hard fought win against a Boston team that has had their number for a while now.
Yeah.
I mean, you think back to those that stretch around Christmas last year against Boston, where we had 2 games back. They weren't back to back, but they were two games in a row against Boston, one at home and one in Boston. And I remember how frustrating those losses were, especially considering that the Devils had an awful December last year. If you remember, after that super hot start, December was rough.
Yeah. For
the Devils last year, and they had to kind of pick things back up in January, and thankfully they did. But what's scary is, even though, or I shouldn't say scary, but what's weird is, even though the Devils feel worse this year as a team, or at least feel like they've taken a couple of steps back, they've actually had a better December this year than they had last year, up to this point anyway. But it doesn't feel like it, right? Like, it certainly doesn't feel like this December has been, and that's what I'm talking about. Like, these, it's great that they've racked up some points here, despite a couple of really, really frustrating losses. But those wins don't feel as good as I feel like they should. You know what I mean?
There haven't been a lot of really convincing wins.
With the exception of the Boston game, and that wasn't so much convincing. That just felt like that was just a good feeling win because it was a really hard fought. And a defensively responsible, for the most part, with a few exceptions here and there, a pretty defensively responsible game as well. Because that's another aspect of these Boston games, is it always seems like our defense just completely falls apart against Boston, no matter how they're playing, outside of the bubble of playing against Boston. But I thought they played a really strong, responsible effort in that game, and that was really the only win in that entire stretch that felt really, really good. The Columbus win felt fine, but that I don't know, man. Maybe it was just that, like, I don't know if it's the same for you, but I feel like even though that goal was ultimately meaningless, that third goal that they gave up late soured it a little bit for me, because it was
absolutely.
Once again, they got to give up a late goal,
Yeah, even though we won and we got 6 goals in the process, we still gave up 3 goals. And if we weren't able to score those 6 goals, which we haven't been able to score that many goals lately, other than that game, it could very well have been a loss,
Well, and that one's frustrating for a few reasons too, because V had, I thought, played pretty well in that game, and and that late goal was just, or I'm sorry, not V, Schmid. Schmid was in that game. Yeah. I thought he had played a pretty good game, and then that third goal just makes the stat line look uglier unnecessarily, and but yeah, so the Devils, after a horrible loss to Edmonton, where they just came out flat in that game, and I think Edmonton had our number basically right from the first drop of the puck.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of expected that game was going to go that way. I had texted you and said...
I mean, me too. They had won, 8 games in a row up to that point. They were really hot.
Yeah.
McDavid was finally starting to look like McDavid again.
I said if they beat us by more than 3 goals, I'd be upset, but they only beat us by 3 goals, so I was like, okay, well, that's right on the verge of me getting upset.
Yeah. So, whatever, it's a shitty Edmonton game, whatever. But the Boston game I was really worried about. So, again, we come out of the Boston and the Blue Jackets games going, okay, Devils are playing pretty well up to this point. And then there's the Anaheim game, which was, from start to finish,
Kind of horrendous.
Just, yeah, horrendous is a pretty good word to use. That was not enjoyable hockey. It was once again, this has been a trend this year where the Devils, so the trend a lot this season has been that the Devils have these first periods where they have like 7 shots in the first period, 6 shots, and they just come out flat. This game was frustrating because it was the opposite. The Devils had like 14, I believe, 14 or 15 shots in the first period. They held Anaheim to 4. They end the period scoreless, 0-0. And I said to you going into this game, what was the one of the things that I texted you going into this game about John Gibson? I said, two things. One of two things is going to happen. He's either going to look really freaking good against us. I think I said shutout. We didn't get shut out, but it was about as close as you can get to being shut out.
Yeah.
I said he's either going to shut us out, and the price on him just went up even more, or he's going to look terrible, and we're going to get like 5 goals on 18 shots on him, and Devils fans everywhere are going to suddenly go, oh, never mind, he's not the guy.
Yeah, we don't want him, yeah. So, of course, it was the first one of those things that happened.
Yeah, Devils end the game. So, despite the fact that they only had 14 shots, despite the fact that they had only held Anaheim to 4 shots in the first, and the Devils had 14, they finished the game with 29 because they only had 5 in the second, and that was the second period that that was the period that had the only Devils goal, and Adam Henrique scores 2 in the period. Of course, it was Adam Henrique, who, by the way, Henrique ends with a empty net goal, which gives him a hat trick, his first career hat trick. You know what? I'm kind of glad it happened against us and at the Rock, just because I've got nothing bad to say about Rico. I don't think any Devils fans do. There's still parts of me today that kind of wish he was still here, but it's just fitting, right? Like, how many times has this happened with former Devils coming in and just killing us?
Yeah.
Just killing us. Not necessarily scoring, pot and hat tricks, but scoring the game-winning goal late, scoring a crucial tying goal at some point, like
shorthanded goals.
Shorthanded, yeah, shorthanded goals. Yeah, who was that?
Shango.
Shango. There was another one too. Didn't Zetterlund? No, Zetterlund didn't have one against us.
No, I don't think he had one against us, but he had a
couple Miles
assists.
Wood. Wood had
Wood.
a shorthanded good. He had a shorthanded goal against us. That was the other one. So, yeah, just a day in the life of a Devils fan. Whenever you play a team that has a somewhat well-known or recent former Devil on it, they're almost guaranteed a goal.
Yep.
Any former Devils player should be circling every Devils game on their calendar. Because...
Yeah. And we don't seem to have the same... in return, like Toffoli didn't score against the Flames. Is it the Flames?
No, he had a couple of really good looks against the Flames, though.
He did, but he didn't score.
Unfortunately, he didn't score. I don't think he scored, right?
Nah.
Yeah, okay. So, anyway, yeah, that Anaheim game was atrocious. The goaltending was not good, as you would expect when you lose 5-1. Despite the fact that the Devils outshot Anaheim by 10 in the first, we only outshoot them by 1 in the end. The final shots are 29-28, and the Devils looked completely flat in the second and didn't look much better in the third. Just a horrible game all around. Defensive miscues, bad goaltending, sloppy play. It was not a good game for Jack. It was not a good game for Bratt. Pretty much every line looked inefficient and like they just weren't bringing it, with the exception of the fourth line, the Bashan, Lazar, McLeod line, which, by the way, that line has been fabulous lately.
And that was the one that scored.
That's the only line that scored, because McLeod scored the only goal. So just that was a pretty rough one to watch.
I think you and I didn't even end up watching the last 7 or so minutes because it was 4-1 and there wasn't much time left, and we know how this is going.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I turned the game off after, it was like 5-6 minutes, something like that. And I did go back and watch the highlight of Henrique's empty netter. But there was nothing else to watch at that point. It was pretty clear what was how that game was going to end. Just an all around terrible effort outside of the first period. And again, this is the frustrating thing. They finally have a hot first period where they're putting tons of pucks on net, and it looks like they're all gears are moving, and they can't get one past Gibson.
Yeah.
And watching that game, it really did feel like it was a showcase of like, man, if we could get that level of goaltending, imagine where this team would be right now.
Yeah.
So, and we'll get into Gibson here in a minute, because I think as time goes on, the price on him probably only goes up, assuming he continues to play well.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So just a rough loss in Anaheim. I don't really have any other thoughts on that. Just an all around horrible game. I don't know. What are your final thoughts on that?
Yeah, I guess the only other thing I feel like what I've been noticing is that we seem to be able to play decently well against teams that are also doing really well. And I know that Anaheim's been on a bit of a hot streak lately, but we seem to be losing terribly against these teams that are not expected to be good.
Anaheim had lost 12 of their last 13 going into that game, so no.
Oh yeah, so they weren't on a hot streak.
No, yeah, Philadelphia's been on a little bit of a hot streak lately.
That might have been who I was thinking. Sorry, but yeah, we seem to be losing terribly, and it's the terrible losses, not just an expected loss or one, lose by one kind of thing, but we seem to be losing terribly against teams like Anaheim, teams like the Sharks, like just teams that aren't expected to do well, aren't doing well necessarily, and we just seem to not know how to play against them. I don't really know what it is.
One other thing I forgot to bring up about that loss. What makes that even worse is not only do the Devils lose 5-1 to an Anaheim Ducks team who, let's be honest here, for all intents and purposes, is expected to be in lottery contention this year. As if that weren't bad enough, the Ducks played in this game without Leo Carlsson, without McTavish, and without Zegras. So 3 of their top young players / prospects in Carlson at minute, if you include Carlson in that group, and they still just come out with a horrible effort outside of the first period. And it almost starts. I don't know if there is a trend. I'd have to go back and look, but it's something I have been thinking about recently. It's almost as if after getting kind of goalied there in the first, it just killed their confidence for the rest of the game. I don't know if that's the case, but that's coachable. You can coach that out of a team if that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So
it's just strange. And the weird thing as well about this game is that there was a lot of penalties in this game.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them ended up being 4-on-4 penalties for the majority of the power play or whatever, because someone else took a penalty in the middle of it. But the goals weren't scored on the power play. Anaheim scored 1 on their 5 power plays. We got none, and funnily enough, considering we only had 1 goal. But it was there was a lot of penalties. But we can't blame it on the penalties.
That makes it even worse. That means they outplayed us 5v5, which they absolutely did.
Yeah.
If this was a game where the Devils took 7 penalties and gave up 4 goals on the penalty kill, that's still a horrible loss. But you think, okay, well, you just took a bunch of stupid penalties and your penalty kill was terrible. This is just straight up got outplayed, man.
Yeah.
5-on-5, just straight up got outplayed.
Yeah.
And like you said, the Devils have a tendency, at least this year anyway, to play to the level of their competition. You're right. Again, this is like what we were just talking about the Boston game. Great effort, great solid win, and then they follow it up with a game that they should win in a fashion that they should be winning that kind of a game, which is putting up 5-6 goals on them.
Yeah,
and then they just come out and put 2 wet farts out there in Anaheim and Philadelphia. And speaking of Philadelphia, let's talk about the Philadelphia game, because this one is equally as frustrating for different reasons.
Yes.
First of all, we're just giving points away at this point. This is
Yep.
essentially what you call a 4-point game because it's an in-division game. So it's basically a 4-point swing. You know, if the Devils win in regulation, they prevent Philadelphia from attaining. You know, they gain 2 points and they gain 2 points on Philadelphia in the standings.
Mm-hmm.
And okay, sure, the Devils get a point out of it, but I know that Philadelphia has been a lot better this year than I think people expected, myself included. I know that Tortorella has a history of kind of getting absolutely every ounce out of bad teams or mediocre teams, you know, and leading teams to respectable records that probably had no business having that record.
Mm-hmm.
But this is a team that this Devils team, the way that it is currently constructed, and with how we know that they are capable of performing, we should be winning these games.
Yeah.
And you know what? I would still be a little sour even if they had won it in overtime, because it's still giving a point away. I said it to you when the game went to overtime. I said, well, you know, regardless of what happens, we gave Philly a free point.
Mm-hmm.
And they are currently how many points ahead of us? Is it 1 point in the standings? Or 2 points in the standings?
In the standings now?
Yeah, right, currently.
They're 5 points ahead of us.
Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, that's right, because they were already 4 ahead of us.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I mean, I still do think that this Devils team is a playoff team, and I think that they will find a way to get there. But the problem is, once you're there, the expectation isn't just get to the playoffs. The expectation is this team should be contending for a Stanley Cup.
Yeah.
And the deficiencies that the Devils are showing, whether it's mental, whether it's the system, whether it's the goaltending, whatever it is, all of those things are things that are going to kill you in the playoffs.
Yeah, that's throttling us.
Especially if multiple of those things are going wrong at the same time.
The problem is they're throttling us to the point where we may not even make it to the playoffs.
Well, I mean, we can't afford to be giving away points too much longer here. We're rapidly approaching the halfway mark of the season.
Mm-hmm.
I think if this team is still out of a playoff spot come January 1st, there might be time to start evaluating what needs to be done. You know, do they need to make a big trade? Do they need to address something at the coaching level? And I'm not saying that, you know, we need to jump on the Fire Lindy bandwagon again at this particular moment. But I mean, at some point.
What about the goaltending coach?
You know, I've thought about that myself. I don't know. That generally speaking, that's something you wait to do until the off season. Most teams seem to anyway. I'm sure it has happened before, but I can't honestly remember a time that like a specialty coach has been fired mid-season for something that wasn't like behavioral or whatever, you know. If anybody that's listening is aware of a time that has happened, reach out to us and let us know, because I'd be really curious to know. Yeah, I don't remember that happening, at least in recent history, but I'm sure there's an instance of it. But I mean, before you fire the coach, you at least got to address the goaltending itself, right? But then again, the goaltending is a little bit of a Beetlejuice. Like we don't know what you're gonna get when we get out there. Are we gonna get like up until the Anaheim game, the Devils actually had been doing, or I should say, up until the Edmonton game, the goaltending had looked okay, and so had the defense. Like the defense had started to come along a little bit. And if you look at the scores, they gave up 1 goal against Seattle, 2 goals against Calgary. There's the Edmonton game. They gave up 1 goal against Boston. They give up 2 goals until the last like minute and a half of the Blue Jackets game or whatever it was. And then they give up 2 goals in regulation against Philly. Now you could say, okay, Philly's not you're not expecting Philly to score 4 or 5 goals a night necessarily. So yeah. Of course, they should still only give up 2 goals in regulation against Philly. But the problem lies in with what I just said in regulation. The game went to overtime, and let's talk about that overtime. So Devils win the initial faceoff. They have several really decent looks throughout the 3 minutes of overtime that was played, 2.5 minutes of overtime that was played. There were a few chances. Brat had one in particular that I thought he should have made a move on, and instead he kind of, he kind of, they do the thing, and up until this game, it has pretty much worked out brilliantly for them the last 2 seasons or season and a half. Going back to the start of last season, the Devils' overtime record is stellar the last season and a half, but it bit them on the ass a little bit here, which is they do that thing where they're trying to get the perfect play. And they do this in 5-on-5 too, and it drives me crazy. And they do it occasionally on the power play. It's started to they feel a little snake bitten on the power play lately, but that's a whole nother issue. But yeah, they do this thing where they try and get the perfect play as opposed to just getting them on net. And the Devils are really good at that in 3-on-3. But if a team plays really good defensive hockey like Philadelphia does, you can defend that and you can anticipate that, and you can kind of just be patient with it.
And they were.
And they had some, don't get me wrong, they had some stellar goaltending in the overtime as well. But the Devils, I think, passed up on a few opportunities that they should have taken. And the overtime, for the most part, looked like it heavily favored the Devils, and it mostly did. With I think Philadelphia had maybe 2 really good rushes, because it got a little back and forth there for 45 seconds or so. And Devils regain control of the puck in their own zone. Jack gets the puck, and he goes to, I think he was trying to drop pass it. He kind of did like a little like backhand, and there was a miscommunication on the ice. They were not set up the way that I think Jack was expecting them to be set up. And he dropped it
straight to a 5.
Straight to Owen Tippett. And Tippett takes it in on what's essentially a complete breakaway, and scores on V. And that ends it. And I think this was probably one of the worst games I've seen Jack play in a Devils uniform. He had multiple instances in this game where he had bad turnovers. He actually had another bad turnover that led to one of the Paling goals. I forgot if it was the first or the second, but one of the Paling goals was a result of a bad turnover from Jack. So.
And I think he knew that he was making mistakes too. Like, it was clear in his face. He was frustrated with himself.
I mean, he went straight to the tunnel after that happened. So, and you could see it in his face. And Jack has generally been the type that every time he has a really bad game, his next game is, he plays like
comes out angry.
Yeah, he comes out. He's got like a little fire in his ass, So I'm hoping that that's what happens. But yeah, this was definitely a really bad game from Jack all around. He pretty much cost us this game.
And he knows it.
He knows
He's
it.
not dumb.
The fans know it. The coaching staff knows it. The team knows it. I don't think he makes a habit of that. So you're going to win more games than you lose because of Jack. It's very, very frustrating, but that is not typical of Jack's play. So I'm not worried. It's just frustrating because it could not have happened in a worst possible game when we're fighting for a playoff spot and 4 points behind the team that we're currently playing, and you give them 2 points. Yeah, frustrating loss. I know that this one in particular was frustrating for you too.
Yeah, it was just, it's, for me, it's the fact that we lost in overtime and we gave them the point. Like, if we lose against people that aren't division rivals, it's not so bad, especially if it's in overtime. It doesn't, at least we get a point out of it. But the problem is when you're going up against a division that is doing as well as it is, and every single point matters as to whether or not you're going to get into that playoff spot, even into wild card position, because we're not in that at this point.
Well, you know what's crazy about the Metro? It's not even that every player or every team is playing super well. Outside of the Rangers, it's like teams that you don't expect to be as high as they are, like Philly.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a bunch of teams that everyone expected to be in the top 3, or the top 5, I mean, that like Carolina and the Devils, who are struggling at various points. In Carolina and New Jersey's cases, in both cases, it's the goaltending. And then you've got teams like Columbus, who are playing, I think, worse than most people expected. You know, I was very critical of them in the offseason, and I said I still don't think that they're a playoff team, but I didn't think that they were going to be as bad as they are. I did think they were going to be a little bit better than they were last year, but they're basically just as bad as they were last year. So the Metro is last year was like the slugfest, and this year it's like everybody. It's like the New York Rangers, and then everybody else is fighting over who's going to shoot themselves in the foot the most. The most, you know. And then there's like teams that are still in the mix, like Washington, that I think are complete frauds and are not actual legitimate playoff teams despite their current record. And yeah, although I think Washington is starting to struggle themselves lately, so they had a little bit of a stretch there, like 15 games into the season where they were playing really well. But anyway,
yeah, they're tied with us in points at the moment, but they're still ahead of us because they've got 2 games in hand. They're 2 games behind us.
They're ahead of us in points percentage. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, should we talk about? I guess the loss to Anaheim now puts us at 1-5 on back-to-backs on the season, and we still have how many more to go? 9 more to go.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a complete 180 from last year, where the Devils had a stellar record in back-to-backs on the second half of the back-to-back.
We're talking specifically about the back end of the back-to-backs.
The back end. Yeah, they're not 1-6 in all back-to-backs. They're 1-6 on the back end of the back-to-backs. Yeah. I mean, the Devils have probably got to turn that around at some point. They got to start winning some of these these second games, because they still got 9 more, which means 18 games in total that involve a back-to-back. It's just a complete 180 from last year. The goaltending, like we said, it's been okay. It's been better, but you know, it still kind of feels like we're polishing a turd at this point. You know, it's at the point where I don't trust it at all, because like I said, we don't know what we're
Weirdly,
gonna get.
V looked pretty good during the Philly game, even though we lost. He had some. I
thought
really
V looked great in that game for the most part. Yeah. I don't think that loss is definitely not on V.
Yeah.
I know that he only had like an .885 save percentage in that game because he gave up 3 goals on 26 shots. But he had he faced quite a few really high quality chances.
Really high quality chances.
Yeah, it's not like everything was just clap bombs from the blue line or whatever, you know.
And some of the saves he made were so solid compared to similar shots that have gone against him, and he's lost them in the past. He was giving up a lot of. He was still giving up a lot of rebounds. That's not the word I'm looking for.
I think it's rebounds.
Is it rebounds? Yeah, he was still giving up a lot of rebound chances, but
his rebound control is terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. But some of the shots he was like flashing the glove and just seems to know exactly where the puck was.
Excuse me. That game could have been over earlier than it was, because he had a really nice save on a partial break in overtime. Like a minute before the game-winning goal happened. V was not the problem in this game. If you're gonna pin the loss on a specific person or a specific reason, V is not it. If I was gonna pin it on a single person, it's Jack in this game, and I think, like you said, he knows that, and I don't expect that to be.
We're not harping on Jack. It's just that it is the case with this particular game.
I'm harping on him in the sense that, like, he knows better, and he knows that he can't make those mistakes. He is. We said it before. Nico is the heart and soul of this team, but Jack is the best player. And you can't have your best player making those mistakes. And he knows that, and I don't think that that's going to be a problem going forward. It hasn't been a problem really, for the most part, and through his career. He's always been a pretty responsible. I mean, he's had a few bad turnovers here and there. I'm not saying he never has them, but he's not someone that you generally, when he has the puck, you got to worry about him doing something stupid with it. So, yeah, I don't know. These last two losses really suck. And the Devils have got to start. I mean, they've got to just keep, I guess for right now, they got to keep grinding until maybe some moves get made. Yeah. Speaking of moves, why don't you update us on the Dougie situation? Because we got some, I think, news that I think most of us expected, but it's not great news. So
so Dougie, it was announced before the Flyers game, I believe it was. He is now he's going to be out until at least April or May. So it's expected that pretty soon he's going to be placed on LTIR. They're saying at least April or May. It's probably going to be longer than that. We'd be lucky if we saw him in the playoffs if we got there, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah, it's really going to depend on what the team chooses to do. I mean, if they LTIR him, that opens up $9 million in cap relief.
Mm-hmm.
You and I kind of talked about this a little bit. I was talking to you about this a little bit in text earlier about it's going to be interesting to see what the Devils do from here, because if they LTIR him, that's a lot of money that becomes available to use to go acquire somebody. And teams, unless this rule has changed, but I don't think it has. I'm pretty sure this is still the case. Teams are allowed to be over the cap in the playoffs because there's no salary cap in the playoffs. Because the way that the salary cap is calculated, it's calculated for the regular season only. Because players technically don't get paid in the playoffs. Like they've been paid their entire season's contract by the time the playoffs start, but they do get like bonuses for being in the playoffs. So they get paid, but it's not technically out of what their salary is. It's a thing. Anyway, there's no cap in the playoffs, so conceivably the Devils can be over the cap in the playoffs. They just have to be roster compliant, which means they can't have too many men on the roster. So are they going to pull a Kucherov with Tampa Bay, where he's LTIR the entire rest of the regular season, and then day one in the playoffs he's magically healed and he's activated off LTIR, and now the Devils have an overcap team in the playoffs? It sucks. I mentioned this on Twitter. It does suck that we're going to be out Dougie until then. I know that he doesn't play a lot of defense, but his contribution to this team offensively is very important, and I think that the Devils' recent slowdown, I don't want to say struggles on offense, but slowdown on offense does have some to do with him being out. The defense has been better. I think that's not just because Dougie isn't playing. I think that's also because Nemec has stepped right into his role and
I feel like it would have been better. I feel like it would have been better if Nemec had come in, regardless of whether he was in place of Dougie or someone else. I
mean, I think that he. Oh yeah. I mean, he was going to come in regardless. I think he's definitely making the statement though that he should have been up here to start the season. I think he has done exactly what I hoped he would do, which is play well enough that he has played his last game in Utica. There's certainly no justification in sending him down now, and
definitely.
Even if Dougie becomes healthy, in time for the playoffs, assuming the Devils make the playoffs, assuming Nemec doesn't fall off a cliff in the next couple of months, you move somebody else to make room for Dougie before you're not taking Nemec off the team at this point with the way he's been playing. So, I mean, that certainly gives us more flexibility to trade for a goalie in terms of cap money. This maybe means that if the Devils want to trade for a John Gibson, we know that they have reportedly re-engaged in talks with Anaheim over the last week or so regarding John Gibson. his current cap hit is oh shoot, I thought I looked this up, but apparently I did not. Let me look it up right now. His current cap hit is 6.4 million.
Something like that.
Yeah, 6.4 million. His remaining cap hit is 4 million because your cap hit slowly decreases as the season progresses. But yeah, so freeing up Dougie's salary on LTIR means that the Devils probably don't need Anaheim to retain as much right now as they would without Dougie being on LTIR. That now the problem, obviously, that comes with that is he is signed through 2027. So let's say, for example, we get the Kucherov situation where the Devils use that cap to trade for Gibson. Gibson comes over. Dougie gets healthy right as the playoffs start. They activate him. Now the Devils are technically over the cap. You got to figure out what you're going to do in the offseason. You've got a free cap now to make room. You either trade Gibson, who you just paid probably fairly significant assets for, so you're probably not doing that, or you move somebody else off the team. And now we are approaching the category of that a lot of teams are currently in, which is what we call cap hell. So welcome to being a contender, because we are probably going to be on the cusp of cap hell for a while. The cap is supposed to go up about $4 million this offseason, so that will help some. But we still have Mercer extension to think about.
Holtz?
No, Holtz is still on his ELC, and he's still got at least a year left on that. Because this
but we will eventually if we plan to keep.
Well,
him.
yeah, but he's in the same boat as Luke and Nemec, which is we don't have to worry about it for 2 years minimum.
True.
So that is a 2 years from now problem, not a today problem. So it'll be interesting to see what the Devils do here. I would have to imagine that Fitzgerald is probably looking at a lot of things right now. Does the defense still need to be shored up? With Nemec playing the way he is, would a Tanev still make sense from Calgary? Zadorov is off the table, obviously, but would a Tanev make sense? I don't know. It depends on the price, right? And I would imagine that the goaltending is probably a bigger concern at the moment. So if you're going to spend high draft or high prospect assets, I think it would probably be prioritized in the goaltending at this point as opposed to the defense, right? I mean, that's not crazy, right? Yeah.
That's what I would do.
So
not that I'm smart enough to know all of this stuff, but I that's what I would be focusing on at this point.
I mean, and then there's also the question too, scoring is down a little bit. Do you think about maybe going out and trying to get some scoring depth, like a third line guy? I don't think the Devils need to go out and make a splash. As long as everybody...
we thought we did that last season, getting some high scorers.
Well, Timo is well. Actually, that reminds me of Timo, and I wanted to talk about him. He's had a peculiar year. The thing about Timo that frustrates me right now is he had like a 6-game stretch right before he got hurt, where I think he had like 7 or 8 points in that stretch. He basically like doubled up his point total in that stretch, and it looked like he was starting to find his stride, and like things were he was starting to get some puck luck and all that, and it's like, all right, cool, this is looking good. Then he got hurt, and when he came back, he really struggled. He had that one really good game against. Was it Edmonton or Boston? I can't remember which game it was. He didn't score, but he had like numerous really good opportunities, and I thought that he was in a lot of really good places. But outside of that, he hasn't been able to contribute a whole lot since. And yeah. I think some of us kind of suspected that he might be still kind of dealing with something, because he didn't, at least to my eyes anyway, he didn't look quite right. And then Ruff, just a couple of days ago, basically came out and admitted that his injury was something that negatively impacted his skating, and that the team is still working with him to get his skating back up to where it needs to be. So that's pretty much them confirming that he's still he's not necessarily still injured, but it sounds like a conditioning issue is kind of how I read that. I don't know if that's what it sounds like to you, but what that sounds to me like they're saying he's having a conditioning issue and they're trying to get his conditioning up.
Yeah, it sounds like that to me as well. It just sounds like he's, you may be fixed from an injury point of view, but it still takes some time to get back to where you were.
Yeah.
In rehabbing.
Yeah, and he's still, at the same time, still trying to find his groove here as well. So he's still kind of got that going too. So I feel bad for Timo. I know that some fans have started to turn on him a little bit. I would imagine that's tough for someone like him. This is probably the first time in his career that he's really faced some serious negativity from fans, because he was pretty well loved in San Jose. From
one of my friends and one of the listeners of the podcast is a fan of the Sharks, and she's very upset that we took Timo from her.
She's like, "You guys broke him. Give him back."
Yeah, pretty much.
That's how I felt about Severson in Columbus when I found out that he got hurt. I was like, "Oh, they broke our boy. Give him back." I would understand her frustration, though. I think we're all frustrated too. I am not one of those fans that thinks that Timo was a bum or any of these stupid things that you see on social media or whatever.
Yeah,
I have been frustrated with his play here thus far, but I don't think it's entirely his fault. I think it took him some time to adjust, and the signs have been there. Like, it just seems like the luck, like he's had the worst luck every single time that he starts to get a little bit of a groove going. He gets hurt, something happens, he gets hurt, he's got to miss a couple games or whatever. Like, I do wonder though that I know earlier I said that that sounds like it's a conditioning thing, and I do think it is just a conditioning thing, but it does make you think that maybe should he have maybe sat another game or two, and maybe they should have just had him do some bag skates in practice or something.
Yeah.
I'm not an NHL coach, but it does make me think that sometimes maybe I do worry that this team rushes players back sometimes, or I should say allows players to get back out there before they really should be out there. I don't like to say rushes because it kind of implies that they're forcing them to go out before they're ready, and I don't think that's what's happening. But yeah, I feel bad for Timo, man. I just feel bad for him. I feel like this is he knows that it's taken longer than I think everybody would have hoped for him to kind of get in the groove, and then when he does start to get in the groove, he gets hurt, and then he's got to work back to getting where he was. So I have confidence that he will get back there. He's still young. It's not like he's in his 30s and he's slowing down,
Yeah, I feel as well, like some of the people that are harping on him on social media, a lot of that seems to be because he's not producing the points that they expected him to. He's not scoring goals or getting as many assists as they expected him to. And while that is the case, he's not getting that many points. I do feel like he's making a difference in other areas. Like, I do see him trying. I do see him, making plays and things, and that can sometimes lead to goals and things. And yes, he has been quiet lately with his injury, still ongoing, those issues. But I don't feel like it's as bad as people tried to make it out to be,
I don't think it's as bad as people make it out to be either, and I would be more concerned, like I said, if there weren't flashes of it. But we've seen flashes of what a Timo that is starting to click and gel, what kind of impact he has on this team, and I get it. We're not paying Timo $8.8 million to only put up 40 points. I completely understand that, and if he continues to quote do all the other things right, but still only puts up, if we're at the end of next year, if we're still talking about him only putting up a 45 point pace, or even 50-point pace for that matter. Okay, then maybe the time for that discussion to happen, needs to happen. Where okay, well, we're paying this guy $8.8 million. We need more production out of him. But I still think it's too early to start arguing about his cap hit. Like he hasn't even had a full season yet. Like he has played less than half a season this year thus far, and he played 20 games with us last year. So he's basically right at the half a season with us mark, like combined between last year after he was traded here and then the start of this year. That's not enough time to make that kind of judgment. If you were to look at it from a different perspective, let's say the Devils were not contenders, right? So there's less pressure, there's less expectation. Let's say it was the Devils from 2 years ago, right? When we first signed Dougie to that $9 million contract, and he didn't put up a 73-point pace, were Devils fans everywhere going, "Oh my God, this is a terrible signing. It was a mistake. Now this is going to kill us in 3 years." No, you didn't hear that from, or at least I didn't hear that from anybody. You want to know what I heard? I heard, well, you know what? He played hurt. He was hurt on and off throughout the season, and it's going to take some time to adjust to the new system. I don't hear Timo getting the same slack,
Yeah.
or patience. He gets some, and I'm not saying that Devils fans as an entire collective have turned on Timo, but in my experience, people have been way more critical of Timo's start than they were of Dougie's first season, which was, like mediocre at best. It wasn't very good. And a lot of that had to do with things like injury and stuff. But I don't hear Timo getting the credit for those things, because he's in a very similar situation. He's been hurt a lot since he's been here. Nothing like super serious, but like nagging things and whatever. I think people forget that when we first traded for him, he was hurt. He had missed a few games in San Jose, and he didn't play for us for basically a week after we traded him. Traded for
something
him,
like that.
Yeah. So, I'll get off my soapbox here because I feel like I'm getting a little preachy. But like 40 something games is not enough time to be throwing it away as a loss and saying it's a terrible signing and it's going to hurt us. Like, no, not enough time has gone by yet. We don't know that for a fact.
Yeah, and especially amongst those games as well have been a whole lot of line changes and things. So he's not necessarily even got the chemistry with a particular set of people. The lines have been changing fairly frequently throughout the games that he's played.
Yeah, there have been stretches where he's looked really good with Nico, and then there have been stretches where it's like, oh, we got to get him off the top line. He doesn't, like, it's not working, and then they put him down on the second line, and he's been on the third line. He's been everywhere basically except the fourth line, and part of that is because it hasn't clicked yet. So I think Lindy's trying to find something that will click, but a part of that is also because, like you said, he's moved up and down the lineup a lot. And I'm just not ready to hit the panic button on Timo yet. I'm not. I think I need to be. I think even at this point, honestly, unless he just straight up looks like hot ass for the rest of the season, I'm not ready to hit the panic button until there's like an entire additional season on top of it. So. Yeah. That's where I'm at. I think bottom line, I think Timo gets too much shit at this particular stage, and I don't think it's fair.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Well, we are going on almost exactly an hour, so I think that is probably a good time to start wrapping it up, unless you had any other thoughts on Timo or anything else.
No, I think that's about it.
All right. So hopefully the tune of next week's episode will be a little bit better, or I should say the tone of next week's episode will be a little bit better. It's not all bad. The Devils have looked a little bit better in some areas the last week. Like I said, I mean, until those two bad rough losses against Anaheim and Philly, the Devils came in looking pretty good. 7 wins out of your previous 9 games is play pretty good hockey, or at least you're banking points, even if you're not playing your best hockey, whatever, banking points, and that's all that matters. So, maybe we could just shake off these terrible lapses here and there that seem to kill us in games.
It's so funny because we've had a decent win percentage for the last sort of 10-ish games. Like we've been winning fairly frequently compared to losing, but it's just because it's not convincing wins, it makes it really hard to be happy. Yeah,
like I said earlier, that's true. That does make it feel less nice than I think it would ordinarily. Yeah, if we were winning all of these games 4-1, 5-2, whatever, we'd be like, whatever. Okay, a couple of shitty games, not a big deal, but yeah. Yeah,
like I've seen people saying, "Oh, the Devils, it's not all bad for the Devils. We've been winning lately." And I'm like, "Well, yes, we've been winning lately, but also they've not really been convincing wins, and the losses have been really bad losses."
Yeah. We don't have except for the Philly game. The Philly game was not necessarily a really bad loss because it was just one stupid play in overtime. Really,
it was bad in terms of the play that created that was a bad play.
Right, but what I'm saying, the game itself was not a bad loss. Yeah. And like from start to finish, it was just a bad loss, like the Anaheim game or the Edmonton game.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Devils need to, I think, stop. You know what actually might go a long way is if you're going to lose, just don't lose in embarrassing fashion. That might go a long way to your confidence. There is such a thing as a positive loss or a quote good loss. I know that there's a lot of sports fans out there that hate that term, a good loss. If we were talking about American football, okay, fine, because there's only 17 games in a season. So, losing a game in a 17-game season is much worse on your record than losing a game in an 82-game season. So, yeah, I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet. Is what I'm trying to say. I am, however, inching closer in that direction as time goes on, and we're getting closer to the turn of the new year, and the Devils are still out of a playoff spot. So, anyway,
yeah, I'm not panicking. I'm just concerned.
Yes,
I'm not mad.
I'm just disappointed. Yes, which actually you could argue is worse.
Maybe that should be the title to this this episode.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Maybe that will be this week's episode name. That's a good idea. All right, hit us up with this week's Guess That Devil.
All right. This Devil was drafted 29th overall by the Montreal Canadiens in 1984 and played 5 seasons with the Devils. He had a hard shot, at one point recording multiple slap shots over the 100 miles an hour mark, and was second in scoring during the 1995 playoffs.
Yeah, I think I know who this is. Pretty sure.
Cool.
Had to think about it, but yeah.
Yeah, I just tried to put one in here that wasn't necessarily one of the most well-known names, but again, because I haven't been around Devils history for a very long time, that's just based off whether or not I've heard the name.
1995 is the first year that I started watching. So, or sorry, no, 1994 was the first year I started watching. 1995.
Before I was born.
Yes, 1995 was the first full year that I I was only 6 years old, but as much as I could watch as a 6-year-old kid.
Yeah, you paid attention.
I paid attention. Yeah. Oh God, I always remember. Anytime I was at the grocery store, I would want my mom to. I would ask my mom to buy me those league encyclopedia, like the ones that they put out at the beginning of every year. That's got all the players' names in there. It's got all their information. It's got their height, their height, their weight, their stats, all of that stuff. Yeah. And those things were not cheap. I don't remember how much they were when I was 6, 7, 8 years old, but I know that they were, for a magazine, they were very expensive. And I did not grow up super wealthy, so the answer was usually no, because they had more important things to worry about, like food. So, but yeah, that never stopped me from asking. So, yeah. But anyway, my point was that 95 is right around that time that I first started watching. So like I start to have a little bit of a vague memory of certain things, and names and all of that stuff. So, yeah, I'm like 80% confident.
Yeah, I feel like you could probably get this one. My plan is I'll be on leave from work for a couple of weeks, and now that I'm injured, I can't really do a whole lot. So I'm probably gonna try and come up with a few names that aren't as well known to see if I can stump you a bit more.
I mean, you can do some more recent ones too. Like you can just pick some like random player from like the 2014 Devils, like
that's basically what I was going to do, is go through the lists from the last sort of 2 decades worth of Devils and find some names in there.
Yeah, because one thing I was going to say,
random fourth liner.
One thing that I was going to say is I do.
Season.
one thing I was going to say is I do think that well, we haven't because we haven't really done any recent Devils yet. Like it's the most recent Devil was what, like 2000. I don't remember who it was.
Something like that. Yeah. I know. I will do some more recent ones, but I wanted to start it off with some of the more historic ones.
Yeah, that's fine. But I would like some random ones like John Moore or whoever.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, I think that pretty much wraps it up for this week, unless if you have anything else you would like to add.
I just want to say Merry Christmas to everyone, and yeah, if you celebrate Christmas, otherwise Happy Hanukkah or Happy Holidays or whatever your holiday celebrations are at this time of year. I wish you well.
Yeah, same here. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays. Whatever it is that you celebrate or don't celebrate at this time of the year.
Is it Kwanzaa? Is that this time of year as well?
Kwanzaa, I believe, is this time of year. I hope I'm right, but I'm pretty sure all 3 of those are this time of year, yes. And also, we will be recording another episode before, but if you don't hear from us for some reason before then, Happy New Year as well. We are rapidly approaching 2024, which means we are rapidly approaching the period where I write the wrong date on everything for a week until my brain finally switches over.
Yep, and we're rapidly approaching the period where all my American friends ask me for the lottery numbers because I'm a day ahead of them, and God. I'm in the next year.
I like to troll you with that joke just because I know how sick of it you are.
Yeah. I also wanted to apologize to my friend Stacey, who listened to one of the more recent episodes where I said apparently that it was okay if people thought that I had an Australian accent and that I was Australian. I am not Australian, I am Kiwi, and apparently I should be very proud of that and should not allow people to think that I am Australian. So sorry, Stacey.
I said the same thing. I said, no, that's not acceptable. No. People should know. Come on. New Zealand is not a part of Australia. It hasn't been for basically ever, right?
It never was, yes.
Like ever. So, yeah, own that, man. Be proud of the fact that you're from New Zealand. Don't let people think that you're an Aussie. Not that there's anything wrong with Aussies, of course, but I'm sure in reverse, most Aussies would not want someone to mistake them for a Kiwi. So,
by this point, I think you all should recognize my accent as Kiwi and not Aussie. So, there you go.
I think we have a couple of listeners from Australia.
We do.
Yeah, I was gonna say the analytics show that. Anyway, we're rambling. Let's nobody wants to hear us ramble for 20 minutes, so let's wrap it up. You can follow us on social media by searching for Devils Down Under. Specifically on Twitter /X, you can find us at DDU_pod. I'm going to say that again because I kind of slurred my words there. At DDU_pod. And you can send us an email if you would like at devilsdownunderpodcast@gmail.com. Thoughts, comments, criticisms, questions, anything you would like to send us, we would love to hear from you. And that pretty much wraps it up. So on behalf of myself and Georgia, we wish everybody a happy and safe holidays. And we will talk to you guys next week.
Bye, guys.